go. Testing, testing, testing. 1, 2, 3. Testing. All right. Testing, testing. 1, 2, 3. Testing. Testing, testing. 1, 2, 3. All right. All right. So and just let people show up here for a few minutes, and then going to get going here. Oh yeah, I forgot that. I forgot what that was. This is a piece of music I haven't listened to in quite a while. Okay. So we're just gonna let this piece run, and then we'll go from there. Hello and welcome to the Sonic Cinema Movie Chat. My name is Brian Scuttle, and I am the proprietor of Sonic Cinema, the film critic, the editor, commentator, podcaster, whatever you want. Call me at www.sonic-cinema.com. And it's good to be back. It's been a few months. I have It's a long story as to why I've been away. It's predominantly been because of work, and I've been working mostly nights. And so the nights that I don't work, I don't necessarily feel like getting on the stream. So uh, it's been a while, but I am glad to be back on here. And I felt like it was the right time to do this as we get started. Tomorrow is the official start of the of the 2022 Atlanta Film Festival. And before we get to that, though, I kind of wanted to give an update on what's been going on with Sonic Cinema if you haven't been paying attention. It's been a pretty busy year. In January, I covered the Sundance Film Festival again. It was a virtual festival, so uh, I went between that and I basically went between that and work. Although I did get to see as many of the screenings as possible, and I got to see quite a few films there. I think I ended up with about 25 movies, 25 features, and a few others that I watched and reviewed over that time. And you can find those reviews on Sonic Cinema as well as the Sonic Cinema Podcast YouTube channel. As I always do on film festivals, I did review the short films and the short film blocks on the Sonic Cinema Patreon at patreon.com/Sonic Cinema. You can check that out. And I actually just finished up my next one, which was for the Renegade Film Festival back in March, at the beginning of March, which that was back for the first time in that was back for the first time in a couple of years. And so that was great to be back. That was a fully in person one at in Marietta, Georgia. It was great to be back in that environment, back with that community. Saw a lot of terrific films there. Got to interview a lot of great people and got to meet a lot of great people. And so it's been a really productive year in terms of film festivals, and the Atlanta Film Festival will be my last one for 2022 unless something extraordinary comes up. Depending on whether they have the film festival back for Dragon Con, I may do some of that though throughout Dragon Con. But right now, the Atlanta Film Festival is going to be the last one I do. A couple of other things. We've got some great podcasts up on the stream on the podcast YouTube channel. Had a couple of really terrific interviews out of Sundance with Christian Daftrup, who's the writer and director of a terrific horror movie that's going to be on Shudder later this year called See No Evil. And I also just did one. I did one with Nathan Halpern, who's a film composer who had 3 films at Sundance that he had scored, and that was great to really just dive into that process of film music and being able to talk about film music, and with somebody who does that professionally. And you can check that out. And actually, he scored one of the films that's actually going to be playing at the Atlanta Film Festival this year. We'll go into that a little bit more. I've also had Danielle Saltzman on to discuss baseball movies. I will be having Timothy J. Cox back on to discuss established classics. I had Amanda Spears on to talk about the Oscars, Carlo from the Movie Loop podcast to talk about The Godfather, and Phil Faso and I have already started to talk about horror. We talked about the Netflix Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie, which was not very good, but regardless, it was still a lot of fun to do that on the fly. And then the most recent episode of the podcast that I released this past week was with Phil Hopkins, who's the founder of Fandor and the Film Detective. And if you've been following me on Sonic Cinema, you know that I've been doing a lot of Film Detective Blu-ray releases in terms of reviewing the films, talking about the Blu-rays, and if you haven't had a chance to listen to take in any of those releases and you're interested in older movies, B movies, I really recommend it. They do a great job of packaging them and giving you something to chew over in terms of the context with these movies, in addition to just doing really great jobs restoring these movies. So that's pretty much it. You can go to In Their Own League, which I've done a few pieces for over the years. I did a really terrific deep dive into K11's work. She did Black Lake at the 2020 Women in Horror Film Festival, and then her first film, Maya, actually played at this year's Renegade Film Festival. They're one and the same. It just went through some rebranding during the pandemic. And that film won Best Picture. And I'd wanted to do a deep dive interview with her and sort of a piece sort of introducing her to a larger audience because she's a filmmaker who I've really come to admire, in addition to just being somebody I always enjoy talking to about movies. And you can see that In Their Own League. And I actually am contributing a piece to their MH in April that I will be sharing as well. Another thing that has started in the past few months is Ripe Banana, which is the banana meter, and basically it's sort of a startup. It's sort of a startup that kind of we're trying to rival Rotten Tomatoes, or at least present an alternative to Rotten Tomatoes and Metacritic. And the way it works is when we see a movie, when we review a movie, that's one of the ones we list on the on those. We present a score, and those scores are averaged, and the score that it gets on the banana meter is representative, is that average. And it's a little bit more honest when it comes to, as opposed to just, the percentage of negative reviews to percentage of positive reviews. That doesn't really work because so many people are confused about what Rotten Tomatoes actually does. So if you could check out Ripe Banana, the Banana Meter. It's got a Twitter account, Banana Meter. I will link to it. I will retweet it often, whether I contribute to the film's score upon the initial release or not. But you can check that out. I've also done a couple of pieces, individual writing pieces for that. I wrote about Johnny Greenwood's score for Power of the Dog, which was Oscar nominated. And I also did a low budget independent film review for Reign of Chaos, which is something that we'll be doing every once in a while. And you can check that out on Ripe Banana. If you're on Twitter, check out @BananaMeter, and you can check it out from there. It's really been a fun community to be a part of. Then the final thing that I think I have to do as far as for the last big announcement I think I have as far as recent stuff that you may not necessarily be aware of, which I haven't really talked about on Sonic Cinema yet because it's still very much a work in progress. I am actually writing my first feature film score. And I've already done the first pass of it. It's actually with a filmmaker whom I've had on the podcast and we've talked a lot about on Sonic Cinema, Brian Ackley. He wrote and directed Uptown and Alienated, and he also wrote 2050, which you'll recall I did an audio commentary for that DVD release. And I've had him on the podcast. We've talked about movies. He actually he actually messaged me in February wanting to know if I was interested in writing a score for his next film. And it took me a little bit to sort of, I wasn't quite sure how I wanted to respond because, I mean, even though I love writing music and I enjoy the process of making music, it's something that ultimately speaking, I've kind of felt was in the rearview mirror. But at the time, I decided to go ahead and go for it because it it is also the fulfillment of a dream, and it's the fulfillment of something that I wanted to do. And so we've had a couple of really great discussions about that, going back and forth. I've already done initial pass on his rough cut as well as other versions of the film that exists. I will talk about more of this later when it gets closer to the release. But it's been a really great experience, and honestly, it was an experience that I think I needed. Being able to express myself musically is something that I haven't really done in a long time. And it's funny because of the fact that I think talking to Nathan Halpern during Sundance and then when I guested on Untitled Gal's project for an episode that hasn't quite come out yet for Godzilla versus Kong. In between that, we sort of talked about we sort of talked about creative pursuits that got me thinking about my music. It got me thinking about the films that I worked on, and so it was in that time that Brian reached out to me, and I'm really excited to see how this process finishes out. He's it's still work in progress. We're gonna have there's going to be more work to be done on it, but I'm really excited about where we've started out, and I'm really excited about the prospect of what this could be when it is done. And like I said, I will have more about that on Sonic Cinema when we continue. So the reason I wanted to do this live stream now is because tomorrow is the start of the 2022 Atlanta Film Festival. This was the Atlanta Film Festival was the first one to say yes to me covering it in 2019. So obviously, I feel a bit of loyalty towards it, and honestly, I was thinking about it in getting ready to cover the festival this year. I think as much as I've loved things about each of the festivals I've covered, whether it's Fantasia Fest, whether it's Sundance, whether it's Renegade, I think the the lineup of films that I've gotten on a yearly basis from the Atlanta Film Festival was probably my favorite. And thinking about the movies that really affected me in past years, whether it was The Farewell and Afterlife in 2019, whether it was Curtis, The Miseducation of Bendu, or The Killing of Two Lovers in 2020. Last year, there was Clean Slate, there was Moon Manor, there was 9 Days, and there was A Killer's Escape. And I really wanted, this is going to be interesting because of the fact that I'm actually going to be working my regular hours in between the film festival as well. And we'll get into that a little bit. That's kind of the way it had to go this year. There's not really much that can be done with it. But that being said, I'm really looking forward to the lineup and what I've got on tap for this year. And because of the fact that I've had screener access, I've already been able to see a few films. And based on how I was able to work my schedule, I've already got some great films lined up for the next week and a half. So that being said, tomorrow is the opening of not only the in-person screenings, which they're fully in person. There are no drive-through, drive-in screenings this year. Pour one out for those. They were absolutely terrific to go to in 2020 and 2021, but the plaza has done away with the drive-in, so it's time to go back to in person, and I'm really looking forward to that. It was great to be back in the plaza last year when I covered it. Um, but I enjoyed the drive-in. It was fun to be able to do that, have that experience. Um, and then also tomorrow they are still doing their virtual aspect of it, which has been really well done over the past couple of years. I think it is between that and Sundance. I think actually to a certain extent, I think what the Atlanta Film Festival has done with their hybrid, with their virtual access has been really great. Um, it's not exclusively, you have a little bit more leeway with your access to these films. If you're a member of the press, you basically can watch as much as you want, which is terrific. And especially for somebody who has loved the programs over the past few years as much as I have, it's been terrific. So I've like I so there are going to be some with the virtual catalog. There are going to be some things that are going to be available throughout the festival. The Creative Conference, there's some things from the Creative Conference that also takes place that are going to be available throughout the festival. There are going to be features that are going to be available throughout the festival. There are going to be short film blocks that are going to be available throughout the festival. Um, but some of them they're also going to be some of the movies that are not going to be able throughout the festival. The access is going to coincide with the in-person screening, and I really like that aspect of it. And I really like what they're doing with that this year. Um, and there are some that I'm really looking forward to checking out. And just a minute here. I'm gonna bring up the. I'm actually what I'm gonna do is I'm going to copy in the film guide for the Atlanta Film Festival so that you can check it out. And okay, so I'm just now seeing this. So Film Detective is a little bit like Criterion Collection, except they do more B movies and a little bit movies that are kind of more forgotten than the higher profile ones. And I think I think that's one of the things that I like about Film Detective that Criterion doesn't really do enough of. I think Criterion really focuses uh, a lot more on titles that you're familiar with, and but uh, Film Detective goes really deep dive. That being said, there are going to be ones that you know are familiar, are out there, and have some reputations. A Life at Stake, which I really loved, is a film noir with Angela Lansbury. They also did a Sherlock Holmes vault collection of early Sherlock Holmes stories and films. And one of the things that I loved about what they did there is it wasn't just like 4 features. They also found silent films that were available that used the Sherlock Holmes character, and it's really a terrific set, but that you can listen to a little bit of the podcast with foreign. Not really. That is this is more this is more B movies in terms of just American cinema. They haven't really done anything that I've noticed that is foreign films. So in that case, Criterion Collection I think is more valuable when it comes to foreign films. But I the thing that I love about Film Detective is how deep some of these cuts go. Uh, so that being said, let's go to the Atlanta Film Festival. And the catalog for the virtual catalog is going to be available midnight, actually. So that's actually pretty exciting. So basically, if you wanted to stay up at midnight and you were interested in taking in some of that, you could rent movie short film blocks and some of the features as early as midnight tonight from the Atlanta Film Festival. I there are a few there is one that I've already checked out, and that review will be running tomorrow. It is Learn to Swim, which is about a jazz musician who is kind of isolating himself after a tragedy. And the way this is played at other film festivals, and one of the things that's kind of interesting about this movie is the style the narrative, and the way the narrative kind of shifts in and out of past and present, and the way it does it is very very compelling, and it's a little hard to follow, but at the same time you still kind of go with it because of the nature of the style, the visual style, the musical style. It's really an interesting film. I'll have a review of that in about 12 hours, actually. Uh, some of the other movies from the virtual catalog that are going to be available that I will probably be checking out. The Game, Daughter of a Lost Bird. Let's see. What else? Quickening, Portraits from a Fire. And you can log on to and you can check out the virtual catalog and see what some of these are about. And let's see. I think that's about it right now as far as the ones that are available throughout the entire festival. And then there are going to be short film blocks as well. There are going to be a couple of short film blocks. In addition to Learn to Swim, which I just watched today, I've also screened a couple of other movies. Only I Can Hear, which is a documentary short, which centers on Coda youth, um, and it's like 55 minutes long. It's about a three teenagers, three young adults who are Coda, who are children of deaf adults. And it's really actually kind of an interesting bookend, I think, to the movie Coda. And I think, Coda, the movie gives you kind of this sentimentalized version of that. But watching Only I Can Hear is kind of interesting to see how they how the film kind of doesn't quite get as right as maybe you would have liked. It's still a very effective film. It's still a lovely film. But I think Only I Can Hear kind of pokes a few holes in that. It's actually screening at the festival next Wednesday, and I'm going to be at a different screening at the time, so I won't be able to see it. But so I watched it during my screener access for it, and that review is going to be posting next Wednesday. Screening this Saturday is Out of the Muck, which is a documentary about a family in a community in Florida. and it's in a small town of Florida. It's only got 6,200 people, and it's a movie that I really am kind of intrigued by because of the fact that it's sort of one of these travelogue love letters to your past and learning about your past from the filmmaker, but it's done in a really wonderful way where it talks about social issues, it talks about the family, and also talks about it really shines a light on the community. And I love the way it shines a light on the community in this case. It's really quite fascinating. And that one has its live screening, in person screening on Saturday. I will not be able to attend it. So I decided to check out that screen. There are going to be a few others like that where I'm having to work at the time, so I won't necessarily be able to see that screening. Uh, Refuge is another one from Saturday that I definitely am going to have to watch on the virtual platform, or or at least watch via screener. And there are a number of movies like that. Hecate, which is a story about two people who, following a horrific event, they are arguing on the road, and they're not quite sure where they're going. And it's kind of a genre film, kind of a romance, but it's kind of an interesting movie. It's playing next Wednesday, and as much and I could be able to see it, but I'm also opening the next day, so that will be something that I probably watch on the virtual platform more than in person. So, what movies am I going to be watching during the festival? So, tomorrow night we begin with a short film block of 100 feet of film, which is a 100 feet short film contest that they do. That's at 6 p.m. That's at the Plaza, which one thing I love about the film festival, gives me more and more excuse to go to Plaza. And then at 8:30, they're screening Cha Cha Real Smooth, which I missed at the Sundance Film Festival this year, and I'm really looking forward to checking it out here. And Friday is actually the same thing. That is the opening night movie, which is 892, which also played at Sundance to relative acclaim. The director, by Damaris Corbin, is going to be there on the red carpet, which I will be covering. And that's at 7 o'clock at the Plaza. And I'm looking forward to that as well. Um, Saturday, I am working, so I won't be seeing any in person, but I've already seen Out of the Muck, so I've seen that for that day. I want to see Refuge, so I will be planning on seeing that for that day as well. Sunday, I'm working in the morning as well, but I will be able to go there in the evening to watch Marcel the Shell with Shoes On, which I really cannot wait to see. And then a documentary called Boycott. And I'm really looking forward to both of those. I think it's going to Boycott is when news publisher in Arkansas, an attorney in Arizona, and a speech therapist in Texas are told they must choose between their jobs and their political beliefs, they launch legal battles that expose and attack on freedom of speech across 33 states in America. It's and I'm That's the type of documentary that I think they program really well. And I one of the things that I love about the Atlanta Film Festival and the way they program things is they really explore personal stories in a way that they program stories in a way that are very empathetic and that really show a lot of sympathy towards their subjects. Monday and Tuesday night I'm going to be working, so I won't be able to see any screenings there. I will probably that's going to be one of those days where I will probably work on screenings at home before over the virtual catalog before going into work. Wednesday, I'm going to be watching A Love Song, which is another Sundance movie that I missed, but I was curious about seeing. So I'm going to be seeing that on Wednesday night, and Hikate is also playing that night. But like I said, I'm probably going to do that on the virtual platform instead. Um, and then Thursday, I work during the day, but I will be watching the Murder Podcast down at the Plaza at 7 o'clock that day. And I'm really looking forward to that one. And let me bring up Murder Podcast. Desperate to get more podcast listeners, Chad Thadwick decides he needs a new topic. After a murder in his hometown, the answer is clear: true crime podcast. With the help of his best friend, Chad starts investigating, only to get wrapped up in a terrifying adventure full of supernatural threats. I love this kind of really out there supernatural type movie, genre movie. They typically have some really good ones there. Um, and then the closing night movie, which hopefully I will get to be able to cover as well, is Maijo, which is another movie I played at Sundance that I missed at Sundance. And that is it for my schedule. One movie that did play Sundance that I did see at Sundance because it was one that Nathan Halpern composed the music for was Emily the Criminal with Aubrey Plaza. That was an entertaining thriller. And if you get a chance to see it at some point throughout the year, I highly recommend it. It's an entertaining movie. Aubrey Plaza is really good in it. And Halpern's score is really interesting. So I hope that people take a chance to see that. Some of the other movies that I am planning on checking out throughout the festival are, let me get to that. The Game, which is about a smuggler with poor parenting skills who becomes stranded with two refugee boys. Miles from Nowhere, which is about a person named Miles who's dying. After a year of avoiding his two closest friends, he attempts to reestablish normalcy by gathering them together for their annual cabin trip. And he wants to tell them about his diagnosis, but things go awry. Portraits from a Fire, which is about a teenager who spends his days filmmaking and vlogging about his community, and he has a hard time with his father and his family, and that's one that kind of caught my attention. And then Quickening, which is about Pakistani Canadian teenager who's struggling to define her identity as she is pulled between her newfound social life and her family's traditional values. Daughter of a Lost Bird, it's a documentary about an Indian child who is adopted by a white family, and she then tries to discover her birth mother, and that's another one of these documentaries that I really am always impressed by the way they program these. And then there's Master of Light, which is about classical painter George Anthony Morton, who spent 10 years in federal prison dealing drugs. And that one is really interesting to me. It kind of reminds me, it'll be kind of interesting to see how how that one turns out. Those type of stories are, again, they're the type of thing that I think the Atlanta Film Festival really prides itself on giving people, and I think that's one of those things that I'm really looking forward to seeing. So that's kind of it. There wasn't really a whole lot more that I wanted to talk about. Uh, if you are inspired to check out the Atlanta Film Festival, at least their virtual catalog, if you're not in the area, feel free to. I think there's certainly going to be a few gems that I think show up on that virtual catalog for you. And because they always do a really lovely job programming. If you are in Atlanta and you happen to be going to one of those screenings that I'm going to be going to, feel free to say hi. It's going to be good to be back to doing full in person. That's one of the things that really occurred to me during Renegade, that I really miss the in person aspect of that. And in that one, it was the community, because I love how close knit the community that Vanessa, the festival director, has built around there. And the fact that it's just in one place, the fact that it's at the Strand in Marietta, I think that is just a really lovely thing that they're able to do. So that is it for this episode of the Songs of a Movie Chat. It's good to be back. It's good to be able to talk talk about things again. I do hope to do this more on a regular basis. We'll see where the year leads. I make no promises. Hopefully it won't be 3 months before my next broadcast, though. I will try to probably do a few quick broadcasts during the Atlanta Film Festival, though. For now, though, this is Brian Scuttle. Check us out at patreon.com/SonicCinema. Subscribe, like, and rate and review the Sonic Cinema podcast wherever you listen to podcasts. And always check out the written work at www.sonic-cinema.com. Thank you very much.